This conference will now be recorded.
Okay,
Chuck, you did it.
yeah, thank you.
Hey, Mark.
Ooh, I hope everybody's making it through this hot weather. When I hike, I have to run from shade to shade. Oh, there we go.
So I guess we'll just give Joel another minute or two.
It's one of these days I had to put my north shirt on to show what direction I was going. So,
You know, Chuck, you can only go north for so long.
yeah, that's
And
right.
and then you have to go some other direction.
Yeah. First tree I bump into, then I change directions.
Perfect. All right. Well, it looks like everyone is here. I'd like to gavel our meeting into session. Now, thank you all for being here and being prompt. We have a big night ahead, so let's just dive right in. Anybody have any announcements or anything? Just to start to kick off the meeting? I don't. Okay. So now approval of the minutes. Have people had a chance to look over the minutes? So these, point of clarification, these are the DSAC minutes. So these are the minutes back from April.
Okay.
Are there any comments or corrections that people would like to make?
It looked okay to me.
It's John McAvoy. I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, I've heard the motion. Is it
Second.
seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Mark Yeager. Everyone in favor, please raise your hands. Looks like it's unanimous, Linda. So, okay, thank you very much. So that is the approval of the minutes. We're now on to community member comments. So are there members of the community that would like to bring some issue to our attention or information? If so, if you could unmute and turn on your camera if you want to. Give you a second to do that. I know the technology can sometimes be a little challenging. Okay. I'm not seeing any community comment. So let's go ahead and move on then to the issue of DSAC SWAC work group representatives. So Joel.
Yeah, Ken, before we get into that, I did receive community member comments over the summer that came to me, and I just wanted to bring up one of those as sort of a theme that hopefully we can get some feedback on it from our friends from Republic. So over the past few months, I received quite a number of communications from people who are concerned about the great blue heron nesting colonies, especially the eastern colony, which is in the hybrid poplars, which I think were planted for some kind of phytoremediation attempt that didn't work out. Anyway, the community member observations, and I'm compiling really a lot of comments I got from a lot of people here. About 14 nests were active in the eastern rookery, with adult herons brooding on eggs or young by April 12th. And by April 20th, adults were observed perched near the nest, which usually indicates the chicks are about 3 to 4 weeks old at that time, from what we know of heron biology. We don't have a lot of observations later, but an observer from Salem who came down with a partner noted that herons were still around the nest on May 14th. But just 2 weeks later, that same observer and I also observed that all of the herons were gone, as if the colony had suddenly been abandoned. As background, last year, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife biologists, as part of the CUP process we were going through, they gave a recommendation that there should be no major construction within 1/4 mile of this rookery from February 15th through July 31st, apart from the normal traffic on Coffin Butte Road and Highway 99W. During March, I had comments from several observers who were concerned that heavy equipment was being used to mine away the stockpile of fill dirt adjacent to the forest conservation zone. I took a look. It looked like this was on the far side of the stockpile, so I didn't think it was a concern at that time, but it looked like what happened sometime during May, that activity seems to have shifted much closer to the rookery. When the herons disappeared, and apparently, I don't know if this colony failed or what, but anyway, so my questions for Republic staff coming from these public comments or public concerns. First, did Republic Services carry out any monitoring of this nesting colony this year or work with ODF to do so? And if so, have those observations been reported to ODFW? And then my second question is there any log of activities that were carried out within or near the forest conservation zone that was identified as being of concern? And probably the biggest concern would be if and when trucks started hauling fill dirt using the gate onto Coffin Butte, that's to the east of that stockpile, which would be more likely to cause disturbance, or even bigger concern if there were any personnel entries into the rookery area itself. So I appreciate if we have any information on either of those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. Yeah, very appropriate to bring that up. Marge, can you wait till after we get an answer
Oh, yes,
to that question?
absolutely.
Okay, great. So Ian, over to you, I think. We can't hear you, Ian. You're muted.
Sorry, forgot to unmute myself.
No problem.
So there's been no change in landfill operations in that area. That stockpile has been in place since at least 2016 or 2017, and filling and mining from it have been taking place since that time. So there's been no changes. This has been a portion of the active landfill site for quite some time.
Yeah, do you have any information about the specific things that Joel is?
No, I'm not aware of any specifics. They do haul soil from that stockpile to the landfill for daily cover usage.
Yeah, the particular concern is the timing. You know, if you'd been doing this in December or say November or even August, there would be no issue. But you know, this was identified as an issue, so I was curious if there was any monitoring.
This has been going on for years, Joel, without the rookery having any kind of impact. So this is nothing new.
So there's no observations and no data, no logs
of operations. No, we don't keep logs of the daily operations.
Okay.
Chuck, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, Chair. I was wondering if Joe could answer this. I see a lot more herrings flying down to the Willamette and a lot of what I call hawks and so forth. Does the herring have any natural predators? Uh, that's what I was wondering that would disturb nesting or with live or young birds in the area.
Yeah, they do. Bald eagles would be one that would be a concern, but the heron experts that we've spoke on this, and Eisinger, since there's a nesting pair of bald eagles in the area, they tend to chase off the ones that would be more likely to depredate. So they actually see bald eagles as a advantage to have them nesting nearby as an advantage. And there's a nest on the Wilson Wildlife Area. So that's an outside possibility, but it's considered unlikely by the biologists that have worked on this.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So, yeah, what else can we determine? I guess, it's not necessarily, what am I trying to say? Just because this is kind of the normal course of operations, we don't know if there isn't something about the operations this year which hit at a crucial time. And I guess we also don't know exactly how well the rookery has fared in past years. So I'm just wondering, I'm sure nobody wants to see blue heron, nests fail. And so I'm wondering what sort of activity or what sort of recommendation we could have moving forward, about this. And Joel, I think you would be the one, I guess, to kind of answer, being more connected
Yeah, I guess
to.
my impression was when we went through the conditional use permit process last year that the company was informed of this as an issue, and there was a recommendation from an ODFW biologist, and it was also pointed out that there would need to be at least 3 years of monitoring for any future permit, and we know that, at least we've heard through the grapevine, that there is a plan, or I think it's actually been stated directly, that the company does want to submit a new conditional use permit. So I was just surprised that there would be no monitoring of the colony this year. But if there's no monitoring, there's not much we can do about it. We'll just say, wait till next year and see what happens.
No, there has been monitoring, Joel, by biologists. I guess I didn't understand. I thought you were referring to landfill operation monitoring of some sort. But the conditions in the conditional use permit were never in place because that application was withdrawn.
Okay, so that was my first question, Ian, thanks. Because my question was, has there been monitoring, and has that been reported to ODFW?
No, that is not part of any reporting until the monitoring is complete.
So to clarify here, when we're saying monitoring of the blue herons, what monitoring are we talking about?
A biologist monitoring both the eastern and the western rookeries.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Chuck.
Mr. Chair, when they say are monitoring, are they using acoustic devices to monitoring with for decibels during the hatching season, or are they using cameras to see what activities are around that, or are they just using observations by the biologist periodically? I'm kind of confused by when you say monitoring.
Primarily physical observation by the biologist when they're on site.
Okay, is there a timetable for when that might be reported?
Not at this point, no.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Chuck, and then Marge. Chuck, we've lost your sound.
Oh, sorry. So the critical mass time is really during the hatching season. So during the hatching season, I mean, a lot of places sometimes sets up decibel monitoring. So I'm sure it's loud noises that would be detrimental to the hatching at young, or if video cameras could be placed to look at if there's any other activities other than from a predator in the area too, to just say, negative on that or negative on that. I'm not sure if that is in the realm thing, but I'm just saying the critical mass is during the hatching season. And do they migrate after hatching season? I'm not sure what their migration patterns are.
Yeah, I think we're wandering off into the
Yeah,
Okay.
weeds here.
that's what Debbie's trying to say. I think that we should leave some of those decisions up to the ODNFW professionals.
Yeah, what
Okay.
I guess I'd like to hear a report at our next DSAC meeting on what was found this year, because it is a public concern and it ought to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we make a motion to that effect? Can you make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'll move
So,
that we request a report on the heron colony at the next DSAC meeting with the findings of the biologists.
Okay, Joel is making that motion. Is there a second?
a second.
Okay, a second by Marge. Shall we
I have
vote
a
all?
question first.
Yeah,
Is that
question.
a motion we can make? Do we have, as SWAC people, authority to ask that to be done? It was part of the conditional use permit before. Seems like a good idea, but I don't know if that's within the parameter of what we do. Before I vote on it, I want to find out if I'm supposed to vote on it.
Okay. Daniel, is this a question for you?
I can probably provide a little bit of guidance. I think generally, as DSAC is an advisory committee to the Board of Commissioners, you can make this recommendation to the Board of Commissioners as a formal motion. And then as an informal request, you could probably request it from Republic Services. But as a formal directive to Republic Services, I don't think that's appropriate. But I think framing it towards the Board of Commissioners is the most appropriate based on this committee's role.
Okay.
Could I hear then the motion one more time to make sure that it's a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners?
Yeah, the one I made was a request, which would be an informal request. But
Okay.
A request that the rookery be monitored by ODFW for impact.
yeah, my motion was I move that we request a report the next DSAC on the monitoring of the heron colony during this spring.
Thank you.
Okay. Julie, you wanted to say something?
I did. I think it's important for you to know that we do have a wildlife biologist who is doing ongoing observations and will be putting together a report, but who let us know when we hired this person, gosh, way back, I'm not even sure, in the fall, that report could take up to 2 years and will take some time. I think it's important, if you're going to make a decision on those things, that you talk to someone who's actually an accredited specialist or a wildlife biologist. And it would be important, I think, for the commissioners to direct us to have that person speak to you. But I don't think that we want to give you a report on something that none of us are specialists in.
Sounds good.
Okay.
My motion stands, I guess.
Yeah, and seconded by Marge. And so I think it's time for us to vote. Is there any more discussion about the motion?
Who are we asking to get this presentation from in light of what Julie Jackson just said?
Well, we're asking.
Who's providing the information that we're recommending to the Board of Commissioners? Who's going to provide that information?
Marge?
Well, Ian said that he had some reporting, that some reporting was done to him. And that is what I'm interested in seeing.
Okay.
And
We don't have
that's
any
what I would-
reports. We will have a report eventually, but we don't have any reports. It's a
Oh,
long-term
I thought you
process.
said that somebody had been reporting to you.
No, they're
but
monitoring.
You didn't
They
say
have to
that.
finish their monitoring before they issue their final report, and that is a 3-year process.
3 years or 2 years?
3.
Okay. So, Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're requesting is we would like to get any more information that Republic has regarding the blue heron rookery. And we know that they have studies underway. There may be some problem. We may have to go through official channels with the Board of Commissioners to get that information from that specialist. But there may be some sort of informal information that they have now that we have voiced a concern about it. And so I think that's what this motion, if I'm understanding it correctly, that's what this motion is about. As you said, it's a request for information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, normally when you do bird surveys, you have the field data, which can be accessed at any time, and then you write a report at the end.
Right. So I'm more or less just saying that. So go ahead, John. You're muted, John.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you.
I still lost my video, but I'll worry about that. And if I understand the motion, then any information that we'll be getting for the next DSAC meeting would be anything we can get from Fish and Wildlife folks. Reliably.
Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like nothing has been filed with Fish and Wildlife, so it would have to come from Republic. It's just if they want to give us the information or not. I'm
Right.
getting the impression maybe they don't want to, so that's we.
Right. The motion is making a request. They can always deny the request or not act in it or whatever. Is there any more discussion? Are we ready to vote on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hands. So I see Chuck and Marge and Joel and Mark and myself. Ian, I can't see you.
I don't think I vote, do I?
No.
So
You are a voting member of DSAC.
I don't think the industry representative is.
Okay, my mistake then. So, okay, so the motion carries. So we're making a request for more information about the Joel, can you summarize your motion again, just for the record?
Yeah, requesting observations on the heron colony this spring, whether
Okay. From Republic.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for that issue. Now, Marge, back to you. You had your hand raised back
Okay.
before this all
Well,
started.
I had a separate issue, and it's also for Ian. I had sent an inquiry to Daniel to ask Ian for information, just general information about how much capacity there is in various areas of landfill site property. And I wanted this information in the kind of language that a taxpayer, that a resident of Benton County could understand. And so the way I framed the question was, how much of the landfill site property by percentages is consumed and in active use today? And of the part that's in active use, what part is not consumed? What is the volume of the quarry site? And then what is the volume of the section south of Coffin Butte Road?
So I thought this would be easiest to review during the annual report when we have the aerial with some of the numbers on it, because some of those areas overlap each other, so it's not
exactly, and that's what I had.
That's why
said
it seems easier while we're doing that portion to go over that.
Can you give me a hint now? I mean, okay, look, it's pretty evident from the kind of numbers that you put in reports that you have a pretty good idea of these numbers. So why?
I just
why
don't have the exact ones in front of me, but when we get to that slide,
and that's why I sent a query to you in advance, so that you would.
I was hoping we could cover it on that page. I mean, if you'd like to go over it now, there's roughly, I think the total is 17 point something million cubic yards.
And I'm saying in percent, in percent. What we're trying to get at is how much space is there in the quarry? How much space do you have in the active section that hasn't yet been used?
Marge,
how much space is in?
Marge, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Daniel has his hand up. I think there's perhaps a point of order.
Not a point of order so much as kind of an informational opportunity to the group. A lot of this information is available in the 2021 site development plan from the disposal site that's available in our document library. I've spoken with Marge about this a couple times,
yes.
And that detailed information about the amount of space available in each cell is detailed in that yes. Site development plan. So that is available to the group. And I just wanted to kind of direct people to that library. If you haven't come across the web library, it's a pretty great resource. It has a lot of really helpful information, and I'm happy to kind of help direct people there after the call. But I just wanted to put that out there because there is some of this information available.
And Daniel and I discussed this, and I reiterated that I wanted the information not in a detailed, dense form, data form. I wanted it in a form that made sense to the average taxpayer in Benton County, the resident in Benton.
And I think a lot of that can be accomplished on that annual report page, because the percentages you're looking for, they're not listed as a percentage, but it's just doing a division problem. I mean, there's the total airspace.
Can I ask you to do that division problem?
Yeah,
can I ask you to present it in that fashion?
So hang on a second. I mean, this seems to me to be getting a little hostile. So, you know, I think that Ian has, Marge, I think that Ian has, you know, answered your question. He would just like to do it with the annual report in front of him. So I understand that there's an issue here, and this is a very real issue about the information being inaccessible to people. So, you know, I think we have all experienced, you know, working with the landfill, that there's a lot of information which is present, but which is, you know, whether for whatever reason or however it has ended up, it's very inaccessible. It's very hard to make any sort of sense out of. But I think Ian is saying, let's go over that when we get down to that agenda item. And I think that's a perfectly good request. He doesn't want to it's difficult for him to
That's
read
fine.
those answers,
That's
right?
fine. I appreciate the yeah, Chair. I appreciate your reiterating or your reconstructing it in that manner, and thank you.
Sure.
And
Okay.
I look forward to hearing the information at an appropriate time.
Yeah. Yeah, Chuck.
So just for clarification, the newest report on the landfill disposable site is completed and it's in the library now?
I'm waiting for my computer screen to come on. Was that directed to me? I'm sorry.
Well, I'll
Yes,
direct it to the chairman, but please, if the chairman would tell him to respond, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, yes, that question is for you, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair.
And more generally, where can people who may be listening to this call access that annual report?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we have a relatively new in the last couple months, a document library. We're calling the Materials Management Document Library. And it is available. I'll kind of describe it here, but if you go to our Solid Waste and Materials Management homepage, there's a menu on the left, like a sub-menu of that homepage, and at the bottom it says Document Library. And you can click on that. It has all the annual reports for the last probably 20 years. For the disposal site, it has a bunch of annual reports for the collection service provider, and it has other disposal site associated reporting like the development plan, for instance, but it has a lot of really helpful information. Also a lot of DEQ guidance around materials management. So if you're interested in going beyond the landfill and just looking at state guidance around different topics, that's a really helpful resource. But we're building that up and we're really hoping it will help make this information available to folks. So yeah, it is online and available to the public.
Okay. You know, if we had a chat, Daniel, it'd be like a perfect thing to put the link in the chat. Just kind of putting that out there. Okay. And also, it would be good for me just to note that there have been some quality issues in this call. I mean, some of the people talking have really been kind of cutting in and out, at least for me. So just wanted to note that. Anything else in the public portion of the agenda?
I'd like to make a public comment.
Yeah, okay, Kevin, please go ahead.
Good evening. So I listened in on the Board of Commissioners meeting yesterday, and I got a glance at the $500,000 budget for this upcoming with Darren Nichols is wanting to continue with Sam's exploration. And I just, as the our advisory councils, both SWAC and DSWAC, I would hope that some of that money would get used for doing some environmental research, testing and things. Seems like $500,000. That's quite a budget that Sam's little check into things to this landfill. So that's what I would ask the advisory council, see if there could be some funds used for some environmental investigation into things like, methane and leachates. So thank you for my time.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Kevin. So just to be clear, the what Kevin is talking about is the results of the assessment by Oregon Consensus, and now the Board of Commissioners is acting to move ahead with a facilitated work group process And the documents have come to me essentially about that as a result of the Board of Commissioners meeting yesterday, but I haven't really been able to look at them. I haven't looked at the budget numbers at all really and what they're really for. But I'll just add that I hope that there's money there for verification about environmental impacts, testing about environmental impacts, a lot of things which we've really talked about here in SWAC and in DSAC meetings in terms of gathering data about the landfill and potential impacts, environmental impacts of it. So any other, yeah, go ahead, Marge.
Well, along those same lines, there's a letter in our packet from both Nancy Whitcomb and Paul Netfield. And this is not the first time their queries have been presented to us. And so Nancy has asked for a motion so that she could get on our calendar to speak about this. And I think that's and certainly in light of Kevin's comments and other comments that were made, there's a lot of interest in this. And perhaps if we put her on the agenda, that will be a focus towards getting better information in these areas and monitoring.
Yes. So I think I don't want to, we could certainly address that now, but I think that's more of a SWAC thing because SWAC is going to have DSAC's not going to have a meeting for a while. And so,
I know. Her comments were put into the DSAC packet. They were addressed to SWAC, but put in the DSAC packet. So that's why I brought it up. And that's fine. Putting it into SWAC is fine. Yeah. I was confused by where I found the letter.
Yes. Well, thank you for bringing that up because it certainly is a problem. It's a problem with your current chair that he has been not following through on some of the threads that are brought up as well as he should have. And so I appreciate and we've had some complications, with the assessment process, et cetera, et cetera. But I would like to do a much better job going forward about following up on things exactly like this. And so if we could bring that up again during the SWAC portion and then put Nancy on the agenda for the next SWAC meeting.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Chuck.
I'm getting a little confused by what topics are SWAC and DSAC because explicitly both are structured in the ORSs as established committees. So I was thinking that anything associated with DSAC should be in DSAC for uniformity. And if there needs to be more meetings with DSAC, I think that should be on the topic so we can, kind of keep everything in the disposal site that's defined by ORSs, and then what the recycle and other important stuff that SWAC needs to be involved with. So I know we're riding two horses for everything, but I just there's so much going on with the disposable site right now with being structured, I guess, that I think by postponing it, even if we have a short meeting on it, that way we can address some of these questions.
Yeah, Mark.
So I was going to bring this up later in our discussions under the bylaws, but it seems like it's timely at this point. And my question is, and I guess my pondering and confusion is that under the ORS statute, the 459-320 sub 4, it states explicitly that if the Board of County Commissioners of a county in which a regional disposal site is located or is proposed to be located has already established a local citizens advisory committee for solid waste issues in general, that committee may serve to fulfill the duties specified under the duties for the Regional Disposal Site Advisory Committee. I am wondering and completely puzzled why we have two committees. The statute does not require us to have two committees because we already have a solid waste advisory council as is described in this section of the ORS. So I'm confused as to, and I think it creates confusion. It creates some timing issues because DSAC only meets every quarter and some things we're putting on this agenda, some things we're putting on that agenda. I'd like to suggest that we are not required to have DSAC because the Benton County Board of Commissioners has in fact established another committee for this purpose. So we can fulfill with one committee, SWAC. We can wear two hats. We can do the Disposal Site Advisory Committee as well as doing the Solid Waste Advisory Council. I would like to propose we no longer have DSAC. I know there's a difference in the membership in that SWAC does not formally have a member of the permittee on its committee, but if Ian is not a voting member of DSAC, I don't see why he couldn't be on SWAC as also an ex officio member, and we just move forward with one committee. So I was going to bring this up under the bylaws discussion, but it seems to be timely now. So there it is.
Okay. Well, certainly that would be, boy, would I yell for that, because having these two committees and trying to parse out exactly what the difference between them is indeed, it's taxing for my brain. So I guess this question goes to you, Daniel. If we wanted to essentially combine everything into one committee, how do we do that?
So I'll give you the direct answer first. I mean, pretty much with anything in this group, you would make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So I think that's the path you would need to take functionally, and the sort of background on why there's DSAC and SWAC separate. It predates me, and I don't have any information to share with you. I wish I did, but I can imagine when this is kind of explored further, there might be some more information that might help guide the group on some reasoning. But certainly, I think the next step would be talking to the Board of Commissioners, or a more practical next step is asking me to sort of dig into it before making a motion. But I think either way, the Board of Commissioners would have to kind of take action on that.
So Mark, how would you like to move ahead with that?
I think that's fine. I don't think we have enough information to make a motion at this point, and I wasn't proposing that as such. But it just, it hit me directly in the face as we were looking at two sets of bylaws. We're having all of this debate and discussion about what's on what agenda. It just seems silly to me that we have two committees, and it appears, at least on the face of the language, that it is explicitly allowed in the revised statutes, in the Oregon revised statutes, that we can have one committee that can serve both purposes. And so maybe we could make a motion for, I don't think we need a motion. If we could just direct Daniel to go get some history and figure out this relatively quickly, so we don't have to go through this again in October. But I'm not proposing disbanding through some motion DSAC. We don't have the authority to do that at this point, but I think it would make everyone's lives easier and more clear.
Okay, Debbie.
This is Debbie. I'd appreciate that too. It seems like it'd be more efficient if they were merged. And sometimes we talk about disposal sites, and sometimes we talk about materials management and stuff. But sounds great. I appreciate it, Daniel. And thanks, Mark.
Yeah, Chuck.
I just want to add is the ORS explicitly gives a little bit more latitude in the function of DSAC when it says, but not limited to sitting operations closure and long-term monitoring of the regional disposal site. So it's explicit right in there. That is not in SWAC's bylaws. So sometimes when you look at these ORSs, you have to go back what the intent was of the legislature, and then the county just replicates the ORS. But the intent is more explicit with the function in the function of the DSAC, where it says review the permittee of the regional disposal site, including but not limited to sitting operation closure and long-term monitoring of the regional disposal site, and goes into the community and so forth. But
Right.
that function, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think that what we can do here is we can make Daniel sort all this out. We don't have to try.
Sorry,
So-
Daniel.
No, that's fine. And I wanted to check in with you, John. I see your microphone's on, or did you raise your hand? I didn't see it. I'm talking to you, John. Oh, okay. Sorry. So if it's all right with everyone, let's just go ahead and charge Daniel to go ahead and look into essentially what's going to be necessary for us to combine the two into a single body. You can identify kind of what possible, anyway, just if you can lay out the ground for us. And I think we'd like to have that at the next SWAC meeting. So since it's kind of a combined thing. So we'll check in with you at next meeting. Is that all right with everyone? Linda, people are nodding. Daniel's giving a thumbs up. All right. Okay. I'd like to move on to the next thing, which is perfect example of what we would get away from, because this is kind of a SWAC DSAC combined thing. I have it here under DSAC. And so this is indeed the DSAC SWAC work group representatives part of the agenda. So as an outcome of Oregon consensus assessment, the Board of Commissioners has directed us to select 2 members to be recommended for appointment to the Solid Waste Process Work Group, hereafter known as what? SWIPWIG? Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, I brought up there, we've got a bunch of procedural issues on this. I brought them up with Daniel ahead of time. Daniel, I don't know if you've had time to look at what I sent you. But you know, first of all, there was just not notification of this with the 24-hour notice. We've got this revised DSAC agenda that now overlaps with the SWAC agenda. You know, it was thrown together obviously in a hurry, but kind of maybe more importantly, and you know, as Mark points out, maybe it's kind of ridiculous, but we are still separate committees and councils. And according to the Board of Commissioners packet, page 80, item 4BI, the plan they approved said that the Board of Commissioners were supposed to decide whether it's DSAC or SWAC sending members. And I don't know that, I was attending that meeting. I never heard them address that point. And they also didn't say whether we should choose them by majority vote or by you, Ken, just appointing whoever it should be. Those were supposed to be things taken up by the commissioners yesterday. As far as I know, they were never addressed. So I don't know how we can even move on this. And it's kind of ridiculous, but that's what it is. I don't know, Daniel, do you have any comment?
Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to it. For the notice, you know, I think you raise a good point, right? There's a Board of Commissioners meeting that happened yesterday. Direction came from the Board of Commissioners yesterday. This information obviously is not within the 3-day timeline for meeting for DSAC, but that 3-day timeline is for a public meeting notice, which everyone received. I don't know it goes as far as minor or major changes to the agenda. it does state, the purpose of the meeting needs to be stated. And I think DSAC is kind of the general purpose of this meeting to talk about disposal site issues. So I don't know about the notice piece. I agree that short notice is not great, but it's sort of what we have to work with in this instance. For the pieces of kind of information that Joel was referencing, I think Joel might have been referencing 2 Board of Commissioners meetings ago where the SAM Imparati plan from Oregon Consensus was basically reviewed by the Board of Commissioners, and there's details in that plan that talk about specifics, right, about how the recommended process would work with the Board of Commissioners, and how that might work. The 2 questions that Joel brings up about, does SWAC or DSAC decide? And if so, how do those decisions come about specifically? Those specifics were not received from the Board of Commissioners, but the more recent directive was that SWAC and DSAC select 2 members, which is in the draft implementation plan that they decided to move forward with yesterday. My best guidance here is to use the group's judgment, maybe lean into the chair's judgment on how to proceed. I do think that depending on the interests for this group, you might have to take it a couple different ways. In terms of, if everyone's interested, there might have to be a vote, for instance. So I kind of recommend using the best judgment as the group, have discussion about it, but certainly Chair Eklund, I think, kind of use your best judgment on moving forward with the specifics of how this group will actually select or nominate folks to be part of this work group. But certainly the timeline is aggressive and is what we have to work with based on the presentation to the board yesterday and the directives we've been given. So I definitely appreciate everyone's patience. I know short notice is challenging, and this is not an exception. So I really appreciate that, Joel.
Okay, so just, I mean, the things that Joel is talking about were indeed things in the information that you included in our packet, Daniel. So isn't that a result of yesterday's meeting? So those essentially were discussion items that I think, so anyway, those were things that, it looked like it was on the agenda for the Board of Commissioners to actually decide on, and in which they did not. So we are indeed lacking some guidance from there. I'm not sure if we necessarily need that guidance, but I'm just wondering. So I think the first thing that we need to talk about is, I know that last year, looking at what was happening with SWAC, there were some times when some things just arrived kind of last minute that SWAC was, I mean, this is before I was actually on there, but I was watching the meetings. And I know that there was a lot of pushback back then, for how come we're making decisions, with really no time to prepare. I mean, so it seems to me very reasonable that there is some sort of pushback here against this sort of schedule, falling on us. I mean, I understand kind of where it comes from in a way, but it doesn't seem to me, it seems to me to be something which we could push back on. So I'm sorry to go on and on, but go ahead, Mark.
So just a clarifying question. So is the recommendation or the request from the Board of Commissioners to appoint 2 people total from DSAC and SWAC, not 2 people from DSAC and 2 people from SWAC? Is that correct?
Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 2 people total.
That's my understanding.
Okay, and then maybe to deal with this issue, might I suggest that we postpone it, maybe have a special meeting in a week? I know that's a very tight timeline that's been laid out for appointing people and things like that. But I think 2 things. One is that It would help solve some of the public notice issues and maybe give other people an opportunity to provide some input to the committee/council as to who to select and represent SWAC and the Disposal Site Advisory Committee. And the other thing would be give members of those bodies some opportunity to ponder whether or not they're willing to raise their hand and possibly get further feedback from the Board of Commissioners as whether or not they want Ken to make an appointment or whether it be some sort of majority vote, because it does seem like there's a lot of confusing issues before us at the moment. So
Yeah.
maybe a special meeting, give us pause to consider and then just deal with that.
Okay. Debbie?
If it's up to the board, fine, but I always appreciate it when people are in committees who want to be on the committee. And in general, I'm a favor of volunteers first versus appointments, just as a general rule of thumb. And I know that Marge is interested, and I don't know if other people are, but it might be worth to kind of get a little preview of tentative interest. And I think it makes a lot of sense that people want to find out what they're getting into before they do volunteer or not. But that's all.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Chuck?
I just wanted to, did I see a schedule that might to reiterate that for the meetings during, I think there's going to be like 6 or 8 of the meetings, and he wanted in that process, but have they identified when those meetings were? I thought I seen something on that, or was I dreaming that?
So no, you're not dreaming it. So I just skimmed over the documents. The work group would be meeting twice a month, starting in September and going through December, I believe. I don't think when that twice a month has been established at all. They would have to do the doodle poll of whatever, to find out when that's going to happen. But I mean, it is a large a large commitment. I mean, twice a month for those meetings. Plus there's the orientation, which is going to take place next month. So that's something to think about. So yes, I do want to acknowledge, I mean, we have someone who has already stepped forward, Marge. Your letter was or your email chain was in the packet there. So we have one person, and who, I don't want to just hide for the group, but we have along those lines of having someone step forward already. So I'm very happy to do whatever. I think the thing I'm least happy about is to make an appointment. But I'm happy to essentially entertain volunteers. I'm a little reluctant to call a special meeting for this, just because it kind of impacts your time or whatever. I think it would be short or whatever. But I'm also quite willing to push back essentially against the sort of tight deadline, somebody kind of making it our problem, especially for someone who's going to make a sizable commitment, possibly of their time going forward, really does need to be thought about before you volunteer for it. And also it has to be mentioned that there's an ongoing concern about exactly how productive that contribution of time is going to be. Because if Republic were to file a new conditional use permit at any time during that process, the process would essentially just be terminated. You would kind of move on to issues perhaps about a solid waste management plan, but essentially the short-term focus of it would then be made moot. So that's another thing that needs to be considered, about that particular thing. Yeah, Chuck.
If I understood everything correctly, when I was listening to it, the processes is going to bridge over all the problems, the material management, and a new CUP. What he's doing is just setting goals of processes, not the merits. The merits still belong to SWAC and DSAC, as well as the Planning Commission, with any filing of any permit that comes under their preview. So what I'm saying is that that ever who the two are, they're going to be open meetings, and I still think ever who's there that we need to support those two and keep a dialogue with them to reinforce and see what the goals are. Uh, so they can best express them and see what the support of the other counties are. So it's going to be a tall order, but I don't think we're going to, like, again, we're not going to be in a vacuum because we still have the merits of anything that comes forward is under our preview.
Yes. If I'm understanding you correctly, let's see if I can just kind of repeat it back. So, the two people that we nominate for being on the work group are still going to be here with us, and we will, I mean, just speaking for myself, I'm very invested in providing them with information. So I think one of the missions of SWAC and DSAC is going to be to help them find out facts and to help them, do the work essentially of that work group. I mean, I think there are representatives, but they're representing us, actively as we move forward. So it's not like they're just going to disappear and then come out again. But it is true that if a new conditional use permit, were to be filed, then the work group's purpose, to clarify how a conditional use permit, all that comes to a halt. Because now now we have an active permit. So.
Oh, excuse me. I'm not sure if it will halt because it's not a quasi-judicial process. It's just goals, and they won't even take a vote. They will just take a polling. So what it's really emphasized there is to come up with some common terminology with the public. What I'm assuming, what is a disposal? How is that created? And I'm just estimating there. So it's still probably a good process, but it will not, it, as far as I'm heard, the county commissioners is not putting a moratorium on SAC or or SWAC, just like it's not putting a moratorium on the planning commission. So that still regards the merits. Is this good? What's it based on? Uh, and those other issues of merit, not of what goals are, although the goals will come with the common language, like uh, with the ordinances and so forth, I'm thinking.
Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, if I can just comment on that. What will happen is that this, whatever this group is called, working group, they have two members of the planning commission. Those group members will not be able to participate at all anymore. Probably our two members will not be allowed to participate at all anymore because it's an ex parte situation. And I won't try to speak for Republic here, but they may decide not to participate either. So the people that are in that group, suddenly there's going to be quite a few key members that will just be not able to participate. So I think it does actually grind to a halt, at least on anything to do with the conditional land use permit process, which is identified as the #1 priority and the main charge of that group. Everything else is secondary.
Yeah. So folks, would you, let me just take an informal poll, I guess. Who is in favor of having a special meeting sometime next week to address this issue? Raise your hands. Okay. I'm seeing 3. Did I just see 3? Or were you in there at the last minute, Mark?
Yeah, so I guess I was suggesting that if we weren't able to move forward, I'm not looking forward for another meeting. So if we can make the decision tonight, let's do it. I was trying to respond to Joel's concerns about, short notice and all those sorts of things, and that's one way to deal with it. If we're okay with proceeding, I need no more meetings.
Agreed. I would like to try tonight if it works. If it doesn't, move on.
Okay, so I did that entirely wrong, right? I did that backwards. So do we have another person to step forward? We've got Marge, who's quite willing to step forward, who has already assessed the risks. So Chuck? I can't hear you, Chuck.
Yes, if I may, I'll try not to do any more damage, but if I may, it might be educational for me.
Okay, so Chuck is willing to step forward. Joel?
Yeah, if we are going ahead, I think as the only immediate neighbor of the landfill on this group, I should be on there somehow. So I would want to be, I mean, there's another category for neighbors of the landfill, which is a little bit loosely defined, but I think it'd be pretty bad if we didn't have any neighbors of the landfill on.
Okay, Chuck?
I'll yield. I'll yield.
Mark?
I was going to make a motion if we're ready. I don't know, John, you haven't said one way or the other if you're interested or have the time, and Debbie, neither of you. But if there's
I
only
may be
two,
gone too much.
yeah, it's a very aggressive schedule. And I like, Debbie, your thoughts about if people are volunteering. I think that's great. So we can have more discussion, but I'll go ahead and make a motion that we appoint Joel and Marge as representatives for SWAC DSAC to this community work group.
Debbie seconds it.
Yeah, so that motion was made by Mark, seconded by Debbie. All in favor? Raise your hands.
Well, maybe we could ask for some discussion. I don't know if there's any any discussion that needs to happen.
Yes.
So anybody else have any discussion?
Thank you. Yes, the chair should say, was there any discussion before we vote? Okay. Now let's vote. All in favor? Looks to be unanimous. So
thank you,
yes.
Joel. Thank you, Joel and Marge. Huge
Yes.
commitment, and I commit to being there to support you. I'm likely to be attending most of the meetings, but it may be complicated to make all of them. So thank you very much.
Indeed. Yeah, Chuck.
Pro Tem said a good word there, support. If we come across certain information or ideas, how can we forward it to them? What's the process for us to forward to them if it's to be a benefit to them for those meetings? Just curious.
Is that something you can answer, Daniel?
I really can't. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in how these things work. I would suggest maybe bringing it up to the facilitator once that person is kind of ready to go and working on it. That might be a really good question. I think it's just a little out of my expertise. I'm sorry.
Okay. I mean, I would say the one very clear solution is to have that be part of our meetings. is essentially to get the report from our work group members and to deliver information to the work group members through these meetings, and also allow the public to kind of weigh in that way also. So that's how I see it for now anyway. Yeah, Joel.
I wanted to suggest maybe we should have an alternate for those times when, it's going to come up for either one of us, I imagine, where we've got something going on. I mean, they haven't really told us exactly what we're supposed to do here, so
it's great. We get to make it up. So I think an alternate is a great idea. Chuck, would you be willing? Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. So do we need to make a motion on that, or?
Let's not. In case we find out later, the organization tells us a certain way to do it, because we can definitely add it later.
Excellent. I think by consent, we can just say that Chuck is on as an alternate. Joel, did you have something?
Oh, I was just going to suggest, since they left it very vague, you could just use their executive authority too. So
exactly. So heck, if they said they didn't say I couldn't appoint them, so I'm just going to appoint Chuck to be our alternate or whatever. Okay, thank you all very much. And again, thanks to our representatives. That's really great. Okay, so I wanted to, the next item on the agenda is just what I'm calling priorities and intentions.
Excuse me,
so
Ken.
Yeah, John.
Daniel had his hand up just a few seconds ago.
Oh, thank you.
Just didn't notice it, I suppose.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chair. I just had a quick question. I didn't catch who seconded the motion to have Joel and Marge on the work group. I'm sorry to interrupt with this.
That was Debbie, I believe.
Thank you.
Was that you, Debbie? Yeah, okay. So this priorities and intentions, I just want to have, Debbie, go ahead.
Well, I saw this on the agenda, and I believe that we could talk about it for 3 hours. I'm a little concerned about how far we are behind, and we have a couple specific things in the future. But I do think it's important to have out there what our priorities and intentions are. But I really see it as so open-ended that we wouldn't all be able to contribute all those things tonight when we have another meeting ahead and we're late on this one. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, so thank you. And I think I'm going to act on that. So instead of us discussing it, which, like you said, is probably going to turn into a long discussion, I would just like to ask you all to just send me your priorities and intentions for when you kind of look at our agenda, what are the things that really are the most concern to you? Because I just don't want to be setting agendas, there's some prioritization that goes on in there. It'd be very helpful for me to know what each member kind of sees as important items and what they don't, so that I can be more confident moving forward with agendas. So if you can just do that offline, send me an email. It's not a discussion, just send it to me as information. That would be good. Next item on the agenda, we're talking about the bylaws. So this is DSAC. We had our special session about that and kind of derived the language. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of discussion. Hopefully you've all had a chance to kind of read it in its final accepting all amendments form. And is there any discussion? I'd like to move, fairly forthrightly to a vote. Yeah, Mark.
So I'd go ahead and make a motion to adopt the recommended changes as proposed, with the caveat that we already talked about earlier, which is I'd like to see DSAC go away. But having not being able to do that, I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners that they consider the recommended changes to the bylaws as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Joel's there with the second. So all in favor? Raise your hands. So I'm seeing everyone but Chuck. Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. So now we've come at last to the Coffin Butte 2021 landfill annual report.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to know if Chuck abstained or if it was a no vote. Okay.
It's no vote from Chuck.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Mark.
And then I just had a procedural question for Daniel, if I may, which is, what's the process going forward from here? We've now made a recommendation that then goes to the Community Development Department to take forward to the Board of Commissioners. What's the procedural next steps?
Yeah, as staff assigned to this group, what I would do is essentially follow our steps to request an agenda item for the next available Board of Commissioners meeting. So I would do that. I would try to make it within a reasonable timeline, and then we would essentially get information to the group about when that would be brought to the Board of Commissioners. But our next step is for staff to request that and then send the Board of Commissioners the appropriate information for the request being made, the details for the changes essentially. But I don't know the date on when it would be brought to the Board of Commissioners based on their schedule.
Thank you.
I have a concern, and that is, and I should have said this 10 minutes ago, and I apologize for that. But it just occurred to me that DSAC is given very clear powers by the state. And if we disband DSAC, will we still have those powers? And that, I think that's a big concern to me. Now that I've
noted. So, that'll be part, I think, of what Daniel comes back to us with, is talking about what, whether those powers are subsumed or whether they're lost would be a very important question, to answer
very,
going
very
forward.
important question. If they're
Sure.
subsumed, fine. Yeah.
Okay. Chuck, did you have something?
I was just attuned what Marge was saying is it's the intent of that ORS because it was replicated by the county being a seat of the state to verbatim say what that was. So one has to really look from the attorney to make sure that that does stay or through the process or DSAC stands. That's what I was a little confused on the motion where we were including to do away with DSAC there, where we were just looking at changing some of the bylaws there.
Yeah. No, my motion did not include getting rid of DSAC.
Okay. All right. So it stands. I'm happy.
And again, my thought process in eliminating DSAC is conditional on the powers that DSAC or the duties that DSAC has now would be transferred to the Solid Waste Advisory Council, because that is the body that's appointed by the Benton County Board of Commissioners, and that's how the language in the ORS is written. So we wouldn't be, I would not agree to getting rid of DSAC if those powers were not transferred to SWAC.
Right. I think we're all agreed on that. So Daniel, you got that information going forward, right? That's a concern that we've got.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Okay, but are we ready to move on to the annual report? Very good.
So Daniel, will you be sharing it on your screen, or typically Linda did that?
Yeah, I'll pull it up here. Sorry, just a moment. Actually, Ian, do you mind if I just make you the presenter to pull it up? I might have to step away
Sure.
briefly. Okay.
All right, can everyone see that okay? All right, so it's Coffin Butte and PRC annual report for last year. Just starts with the table of contents. And we move on to the slide that covers airspace and remaining airspace. And so this is the one I wanted to kind of walk through with people that may not be as familiar with it. So at the top, we list what our total airspace is for the site. So that is everything that has been filled to date, plus is currently permitted for filling in the future. So that includes the area where we're filling right now and the quarry ultimately.
How about the area south of Coffin Butte?
That has to go through a conditional use permit, so that is not included.
Thank you.
So further down in here, we list the amount, the 21.4 million cubic yards. So that's the portion of that roughly 39 million yards that's been filled to date. And I did some quick calculations, and that's about 55%. So that gives you a percentage, which means we have about 45% of those yards left to fill. And that is this number right here, that's 17.3 million cubic yards.
And does that include the quarry?
It does.
Okay.
Of that, I mean, roughly 85% of that number is in the quarry. So about the other 15% is in the cell 5 area that we're filling right now. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, Marge.
Yeah. The one it doesn't answer is how big is the area south of Coffin Butte Road?
That is all available on the county's website. I'm not sure the exact acreage of that parcel off the top of my head.
In terms that relate to the figures that cubic yards.
Oh, well, that was all retracted. I don't have those numbers in front of me. Those were part of our original conditional use permit volumes. I want to say it was about 12 million cubic yards, but I don't have that number in front of me. Again, that was part of the conditional use permit that was retracted. So it's not included in any of this. Any other questions on this slide?
I do have one, which is that here it says that site life extends to roughly 22 years. And yet we keep hearing this, we only have 4 or 5 years left.
So that's
how does that foot?
That's including the quarry area.
Okay, it's 4 or 5 years without the quarry. So
Correct.
with the quarry, it's the quarry then is about what, 18, about 17 years.
Yeah, probably closer to 15 to 18. It just depends on the density. We can calculate site life using kind of an industry standard density or we can also look at it based on our more recent 3-year average, and it's somewhere in between those. All density is always fluctuating year to year.
Yeah, but that's rough. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I
Any other
ask a quick
questions?
question?
Sure.
Yeah, this is Joel. Oh, sorry. Somebody else want to jump in? Yeah, my question was just how much, if the quarry, since the quarry has not been completely excavated now, do you have a number on how much volume you would lose from that estimate if you say had to go into it and, as it is right now?
I do not have that off the top of my head. It's a fairly substantial amount, though.
Okay.
So, Ian, so there's a number which is part of this number is anticipating a certain amount of material removed from the quarry.
It's anticipating, this number is all based off of the quarry being fully excavated.
Thank you.
Okay. So if the and how long would it take for the quarry to be fully excavated?
Well, at their current rate, that's where it's that I believe they said 8 to 10 years. Again, it's hard to predict with exact dates. They depend heavily on what the economic situation is. Construction goes up or down depending on how much new construction there is.
So the actual, I mean, what we're actually looking at going forward is less time, because there's going to be, if I understand correctly, what you just said is there's like 4 years filling the current cell, and then there's maybe some time when you're able to fill an area which is not the quarry. But going ahead, you know, at like year 5, year 6, year 7, the landfill operation is going to move into the quarry. And so there's going to be some sort of negotiation, I imagine, where you're still trying to get rock out of the quarry, but garbage is starting to come in. And so
there probably will be a little bit of that, but the challenge with that moving in and quarrying at the same time is landfill cells, the very first cell you build in a new area is the least efficient from the number of acres you have to construct versus the amount of airspace you get. And that's because if you think about building basically a pyramid, you put a square down and you have a pyramid with sides coming in from 4, or slopes coming in from 4 different sides. So
sure,
you don't get as much volume out of it. It's as you add and you start building up against the side of the hill, you start basically building an inverted pyramid where you're lining a small area and you're picking up the area between the crest of one pyramid and the side of the hill. So that's where anytime we go into a new area, the first cell we build is always much larger than subsequent ones. So there's not a lot of time for them to continue to quarry.
okay. So if things go forward just the way they are now, we are looking at less air volume, airspace available, and we're not sure exactly how much, but essentially, if nothing different happens, we're looking at we're looking at a shorter time frame for the quarry to fill.
We would be.
Right, because we're looking at a smaller amount of airspace available.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And what is the operating, how many tons or cubic yards per year is the baseline for these calculations?
So all of that is listed in here. This one uses an assumption of 750,000 tons.
Okay.
Again, it's similar to a quarry when if the economy goes down, waste generation goes down. If it goes up, it goes up.
Okay. When was the last year that the landfill took in 750,000 tons? Hasn't it been greater than that for several years?
It has. There was some volume coming out of the Portland area that is no longer. And then last year was higher due to a large volume of the wildfire debris cleanup from the Santiam Canyon mainly.
Okay. So where does the 750,000 tons, why do you use that as an average?
It's what our finance team is forecasting as their best estimate.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
Oh, I just want to make a remark, which is 2016 was the last time you had less than 750,000 tons accepted.
Yeah,
So
that's
this is
according to these PRC
when
reports.
we started receiving the additional from Portland market.
So this is Mark. I have a number of questions on this page.
Sure.
So I did a comparison between this page for 2021 and the same report from last year. And there are a number of anomalies in the numbers that I haven't been able to reconcile. So for example, in the first line in the 2021 report, it says there's permitted airspace of 38,997,848 cubic yards. That same line in 2020 said 38,443,830 cubic yards. How has the permitted airspace been increased between 2020 and 2021?
So as part of our 2020 permit renewal, we updated the site development plan with DEQ. And I think Daniel mentioned that earlier, that you have it in the library. But part of that was refining the design of cell 6. And in doing so, it did slightly increase the volume, basically just changing some of the base grades and the slopes inside of the liner portion. So it did result in a kind of an odd one-time change on that line.
So when you who approved that?
Oregon DEQ.
Without any public process?
That's because it's no change to the overall dimensions of the outside of the landfill. This was basically just a slight fine tuning of the quarry design that changed some of the numbers upward slightly.
Okay. Then under the discussion of how much of the landfill has been consumed, at the end of 2020, it said there were 20,455,706 cubic yards consumed. And if you add in the number from this year, which is the 1,067,415, that gets you to 21,523,121. But the 2021 report says that 21,389,767 has been consumed. How come those numbers don't add up?
This is because of the way the actual aerials are completed. Typically, we complete them relatively early in the year, and they make projections based off of tonnage assumptions through the end of the year. Then when we fly the next year, they true up whether there's a difference between what the assumption was in March versus what the actual consumed airspace was by the end of the year. So they're always going to be a little bit different.
So there's actually less space that's been consumed than what it says here?
I do not have that one in front of me, so I'm sorry I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the total permitted and the consumed are directly calculated on an annual basis. Any kind of remaining volume is that could fluctuate based on the true up between projections when it's done on an annual basis and the following year when the actual flight is flown over the landfill.
Well, that makes it sorry, but it makes it super confusing to be able to track what's really happening. And it's not a minor number, it's several 100,000 cubic yards. And then the same thing is true for the remaining capacity. If you do the calculations, and you do the subtraction, it's 17,608,000 versus 17,249,000. So that part, it just, I don't know, it's quite confusing. And I assume you're going to say that's the same thing because flyovers and this, that, and the other thing, the numbers change?
I believe that's what it is. Like I said, I don't have the two in front of me to compare. I can definitely look at them and see what the comparison is that you're doing, but
well, it's pretty simple math. I just took the numbers from 2020 and then added in the numbers that you guys said happened in 2021, and they don't match up. So, all right, well, and so then the other question I had was in the second paragraph where the first sentence says the remaining capacity for the entire permitted landfill footprint. Is that really airspace, not footprint?
well,
It's odd that we're using the term footprint here instead of airspace. Everything else is talking about airspace. This then talks about just the footprint.
this is language that's carried over in this annual report for probably 20 years. I don't know why they selected the word footprint. It is airspace. I'm not sure why someone at some point chose that.
Okay, thank you, Ian.
It predates my time.
Thank you, Ian.
So thanks, Ian, for answering our questions. Where, like I said, these things can just seem very mysterious to us. So I have some questions which are related, but they come from a different source because I'm looking at the report on Coffin Butte landfill on the EPA website.
Mm-hmm.
So this is ghgdata.epa.gov. They have a page on Coffin Butte. And so you can kind of go back several years, kind of looking at the data here. And so the first question I had is, what happened between 2016 and 2017? Because the amount of the landfill capacity changed on the EPA site from 28.7 million to 35.5 million. So 7 million just kind of appeared that year. Do you know?
And I'll be honest, I am not familiar with that website, so I'm not sure where they're pulling their information from.
Okay. But you don't know of anything happening in those years as to why?
No, we accepted more waste volume starting in 2017, but I'm not sure what the units are that you on their website or where they're pulling any information from.
Yeah. Well, it says landfill capacity, and I don't think they tell me exactly here what the units are, but it's mapping pretty.
They use megagrams and other units. I don't know why it would have changed significantly though during that period.
Right. Well,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, the landfill capacity at 35.5 is, roughly in the ballpark of your 38.9 cubic yards, but it's really mystifying there are these mystifying things about why all of a sudden that number would be changed.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have, so I'm not sure.
Okay, but I mean, do they work with numbers? Does the EPA work with numbers that you give them, that Republic gives them, I should say?
We give them numbers for greenhouse gas reporting that's done through the corporate level, but they wouldn't have changed something like that, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, they also have, there's an estimated year of closure for the landfill. And it was also odd because between 2017 and 2018, in 2017, well, in 2016, it said the landfill closure year was 2058. And then 2017, it said 2058. And then in 2018, so after that big increase had happened, it dropped to 2048. And then it dropped in 2019 to 2044. And so now currently the last year they have there is 2020, and the number is still at 2044. So that's kind of mapping to what you had said.
Yeah, that may be, I'm not sure what the source of all of their data is, but it may be just the way they model things by using the previous year for the rest of the site life. I'm not sure.
Okay. So is there any way we can get some clarification about that kind of the number anomaly between 2016 and 2017?
On the EPA website?
Yeah.
I mean, if you send it to me, I can try to look at it. I can't guarantee I'm going to be successful.
Sure, I understand. I'm happy to send you the number. It's just, yeah, it's just very odd. That's I just had those, that was related to, landfill duration and that sort of thing. So I thought I would bring it up. Are there any more questions on this page? Do we want Ian to move on? I'm sorry, I can't see everyone now. So Chuck, do you have your hand up?
I can't see him either.
Please, thank you.
Yeah.
I was
Folks,
just wondering.
Just speak up now because I can't see you. You're just
Okay, no problem. Invisible tonight. That's good.
Yeah.
Are any of the cells closed by DEQ classification?
We do have several closure areas, yes. What we call cell 1 and 1A were closed in the mid to late 90s. And then they did some partial closures. So it's not that the cell is completely closed, but the outside slope area on a portion of cells 2 and 3 received partial closure back in the early to mid 2000s, I believe.
Okay. The other cells is there nature that are still open to settle over time to add more solid waste to them in the airspace?
Yes, that's why we don't typically cap until we get a little further along, because we do pick up settlement. That's also what helps improve densities, because that long-term settlement over time increases the volume of waste that is in a set volume.
Is that significant enough to give additional life to the landfill?
It really varies from year to year. If we're in a new cell down on the floor where there's not a lot of vertical volume of waste compressing down, it's pretty low number. When you get up higher, it's a little higher, but it's still pretty small amount. I mean, I'm going to say 50,000 cubic yards maybe in a year.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on, shall we?
Next slide is just a list of what projects we were completing this year. We've talked about most of them, but finishing up that burn dump location, landfill gas infrastructure, which is ongoing as we speak, should wrap up in a week or two. We're going to be paving starting August 14th, our entrance road from our scale house to the public area. And then, yeah, Brock's team will continue to deploy tarps to help shed rainwater.
So I just have one question here, Ian, and I wonder if you might explain what a collapsed well is.
So with that settlement that we mentioned, at times wells will partially collapse and get liquid buildup in them and not be as effective. So we decommission those and add new, larger number of them each year. The number of we've switched over to steel vertical well casing, and it's very almost non-existent for collapsing anymore though.
And so two questions related to that then. First is, how do you know when a well is collapsed? How do you become aware of it?
On a vertical well, you'll see flow potentially change, and we can put some a sounder down it, basically a device to check the depth to see if it's full depth still. But again, that's pretty uncommon at this point.
And then how many, because you say that a number of collapsed wells will be decommissioned. How many collapsed wells are there?
This year, we don't have any. This, again, is probably old language that shouldn't be carried over any further.
Oh.
With that change in material, it's greatly helped. It's much more expensive, but it's much, much stronger.
And Ian, to be clear, these wells are for landfill gas.
Correct. That's what's in this picture. It's from a few years ago. This is the gas drilling rig. It's kind of a fancy excavator that has a 3-foot diameter special drilling bucket that drills down through the waste and pulls it out of the hole. And then they'll set the well casing in there and backfill with rock, and then seal the upper portions with soil and bentonite.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we can move on.
Next one's the summary of the environmental monitoring report, and this is our annual report. We present to DEQ every year. Daniel also has a copy of the full version, but short answers, trends continue to be where we'd like to see them. Areas on the west side where the old landfill was, we expect to, with the removal of that landfill, to be completely removed over time. And then on the east side, we didn't see any trends outside of the normal.
This is Joel. I have a question. It's an old question. I still haven't really gotten a good answer on it. The arsenic issue is something that I've tried to look into. I've looked in Oregon Department of Water Resources database. I just don't see other wells in this neighborhood that have such high arsenic. So what's the basis for the statement that the arsenic is, these are natural background levels? Yeah, are there baseline data prior to disturbance from quarrying on the site? Or do you know of wells that are in the neighborhood, not on the site, that have those levels? And I guess the new question, just to throw a third one in, did the new wells on the south side of Coffin Butte Road give any insight on this?
So I'm going to defer to our groundwater expert, Eric Tuppen, on these ones.
Yeah, Joel, the simple question is the monitoring wells that we put in before we start landfilling, we get baseline information from those on the water quality. So MW26, MW27 are on the east side, for instance. A much older well, MW9S, which went in, it's right along the highway. That's about a 100-foot deep well, I think it is. That went in the in the 90s, I believe, maybe late 80s. So we got initial water quality from those wells, and they all, from 9S, the range in arsenic concentrations there is about 27 to 42 micrograms per liter. MW26 baseline concentrations for arsenic were 12 to 16, and at MW27 it's 5 to 19 micrograms per liter. So we have baseline concentrations before we really start landfilling in these wells, just naturally occurring. So, these are different types of wells that I think you're probably researching online from the Department of Water Resources or I'm not sure what wells you're looking at or what they're presenting or what kind of data is coming from that. So that's what we base our natural, the statement saying that there's naturally occurring arsenic in the system.
Okay, thanks, Eric. But those are drilled in the 1990s, and landfilling of this site started all the way back in the 1940s, and there's been quarrying
we're in different parts of the landfill.
Yeah, but also there was quarrying on the east side already back in the World War II period, and certainly filling in the 1970s. So the disturbance from quarrying, that's been my question is, how do you have a baseline on possible leaching from disturbance from quarried material into the area?
I guess I'm not sure I'm understanding where the disturbance is coming from or where it's going to. I mean,
when you
know.
You blast rock and you fragment it, and
no, I understand what quarrying is, but I think there was some quarrying on the far east side, but I'm not sure why that would be affecting the wells in the alluvium or in the shallow units.
So yeah, you don't have any baseline data before that. In other words, I mean,
not before 19. Yeah, I mean, before the wells went in, we don't have baseline information, correct?
I don't want to get into too bogged down of a detailed discussion here, but there are ways that water gets into alluvium from fractured basalt.
Okay.
And then my follow-up question was, have you been getting any new data from the wells south of the Coffin Butte Road? I know there were some drilled for the CUP application, which could potentially be monitoring locations. Are you monitoring those, or are none of those actually designed as monitoring wells?
All of those borings, they were drilled as geotechnical borings. We installed no wells in those. That was all done for geotechnical purposes.
Okay, so no
monitoring. The only wells that we have over there are the old well MW16, which is where the east pond is. That was decommissioned a while back. And then we have MW8, 8S and 8D, and MW15, I think, are the three wells on the south side of the road.
Okay. Are there any plans to put more in that area?
Of course. Yeah, we would, if at the point in time where we would, if we were going to be, expanding in that area, there would be a whole series of wells, both on the downgradient and upgradient side of the development area.
Okay, but nothing yet, so.
No, nothing yet, no.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Yep.
So with the caveat that this is Mark, that I haven't looked at the full DEQ report. Just looking at this, I guess this is a summary report, the 2021 report. Maybe somebody can help explain to me what monitoring well 26 and 27 are supposed to represent. I mean, there's a lot of data here about monitoring well 26 and 27, and I wrote on the side of my thing, why are we only monitoring these? And maybe that's not true. Maybe we're monitoring a bunch of other ones. But with regard to 26 and 27, it looks like the only thing that's being monitored based on table 4.2 are just the standard drinking water contaminants. There's not information presented here about VOCs or other sorts of things for these two wells. So maybe I could get an understanding of why these two wells, why we're only looking at basically the Safe Drinking Water Act components.
Yeah, those two wells, there's two parts of the landfill. There's kind of the east side and the west side. So these two wells are the compliance wells for cells, the multi-unit cell that contains cells 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're on the east side of the landfill. So those are the two compliance wells that we monitor. There are a number of, there are more compounds that we monitor for that are shown on table 4 too. These are the what are called indicator parameters. What we do is we initially sample for VOCs, and there's probably a list of 64 VOCs. There are a number of trace metals. I think there's 15 trace metals. There's, in addition to these inorganic compounds, there's probably 15 or 20 of those. So we monitor those for baseline during 2.5 years of baseline monitoring when we put the wells in at the very start. And then we determine what wells or what compounds are most indicative of leachate leakage. And then we go with those and we develop statistical limits for I think we have eight compounds here to look at where we or when or what would indicate a leak from the landfill or give indications of landfill effects. So that's why we sample these 8 compounds at those 2 wells, in addition to 24 other wells around the site, twice a year. And then every 3 to 5 years, depending on DEQ schedule, we do a sampling and testing for a full suite of compounds. So including all of the trace metals and all of these compounds in addition to the VOCs. We also test the VOCs twice a year, by the way. And then at those, what we call split sampling events, the DEQ comes out and they take their own group of water samples from those wells, and then we compare the two and see how they compare. I think the last time we did that was a couple years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So, I can't remember exactly what the date is for the next time we have that split sampling event, but so we'll come back every, like I said, 5 years and do that kind of split sampling event, comprehensive split sampling event with the DEQ. Does
Thanks,
that
Eric.
answer your questions?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I guess so. There's obviously some much larger report that contains all of this information.
Correct.
And
Correct.
That's
Daniel,
the thing that Daniel has.
yes, we just pull a summary out for this document because the other report's probably 80 plus megabytes. Rather annoyingly.
And it's probably a little dense.
It's probably 1,000 pages.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. I don't know if other people have questions on this page, but I was curious about the leachate production. A couple of questions there. One was, it seemed a little bit odd wording that in 2020-21 that there was an estimated of approximately 32.3 million gallons of leachate. I assume that that's measured either both in truckloads and also measured at the city of Corvallis.
It's measured multiple ways. It's measured out of flow meters coming out of each individual sump, and it's measured via volume that's disposed.
Leachate collection system. Maybe you could explain what that is.
Sorry, I think you were breaking up. I was talking about the measurement takes place via the flow meters at the sumps as well as the volumes disposed. And any kind of flow meter has a small, even if it's a couple % margin of error, it adds up versus trucks that are, say, 7,000 gallons. Well, if it's a little bit short over the year, so we compare the two to come up with, to verify that those two totals are very close together.
And they're usually within a couple %.
Yeah.
Okay, but I assume you're billed some number by the city of Corvallis for X million gallons, right?
We are billed by the flow meter there, yes, on a monthly basis. So
all
that's separate from this.
And the secondary leachate collection system, what is that? Is there a primary one and a secondary one?
There is. It's 2 leachate collection systems. So it's basically the primary system with the secondary below it.
And is that everywhere? There's 2 levels of leachate collection?
Everything in the modern line cells, correct? Everything from cell 2 forward.
All right, thanks. And then the final thing, I'll shut up then, or at least for now. At the very last line, it says that all these reports are at the Benton County Health Department, and I assume that needs to be changed to community development.
No, it does. Again, carryover language.
Okay.
So if I can just pause here. So looking at this primary and secondary leachate collection systems. So the primary is above, the secondary is below. What is that sentence kind of indicating? VLI continues to monitor, that system. What are you monitoring for?
So as part of the monitoring, we monitor leachate parameters in both the primary and the secondary.
Okay.
So Eric has a whole suite of items that are monitored.
Yeah, as well as, so we do the quality coming out of both the primary leachate collection system, secondary, which is kind of the secondary leachate collection system beneath that. And we also monitor the volumes in both. So the volume of secondary leach, what's coming out of the secondary leachate collection system, and what's coming out of the primary leachate system. So.
Okay. And what is that monitoring telling you or showing you? Why? I guess I'm a little confused just by the language. Would it be an option that you wouldn't monitor that system, or?
Well, I think the goal, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, the goal of monitoring those parameters is so that you can identify typical concentrations of various items in leachate. So it gives you a baseline to compare against if you were seeing something in a monitoring well.
Yeah, that's with respect to quality, that's correct.
Okay, great. Shall we move along?
Sure. We kind of covered that first section already. Next one is the odor complaints from last year that we received directly to the landfill or through DEQ to us, and we didn't add the number for the ones they provided without any information, but left them as a note because we do not know what they were for necessarily. Next page is a breakdown by county of the tonnage from the various counties.
So this is Mark. I have a question here. So I see that for commercial and intercompany franchised and third-party franchised, you are tracking the construction and demolition debris by tons. But then under private vehicles, is there any monitoring of how much construction and demolition debris comes in via private vehicle?
I am not sure the breakdown on this one. I don't know if you know, Brock.
Yeah,
I believe the volume would be pretty low, but I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know the breakdown, but I do know that when the public vehicles come across, they are still measured in tonnage, even if it is C&D. So I don't know if it's, cubic yards or if they break down like that. But so yeah, I mean it's just measured in tonnage.
Well, yeah, I guess part of my question is, as part of the franchise agreement, there's reference to eventually constructing some sort of construction and demolition debris facility, transfer facility, and part of what's happening here is we're having material that is going into the landfill that maybe shouldn't necessarily or might not necessarily be needing to go there. And if we're not tracking how much construction and demolition debris is coming in by private vehicles, I assume there's a fair amount from contractors and things like that, where people are bringing in vehicles full of, wallboard and, all those sorts of things, all the private contractors that are doing that work that aren't paying for a franchise hauler to come and pick it up. It's easier and quicker for them to take it right to the landfill. So with the franchise agreement saying that, maybe there's some objective, it's very vaguely and weakly worded, but this is material that doesn't necessarily need to be going into a landfill. And so that's why I'm asking the question, if we have some sense of not tonnage of waste that's coming in by private vehicle, but how much of that is construction and demolition debris.
So all of that is tracked separately in this report. I'm not quite sure where the formatting and the different categories that were input on this actual form were originally created. I mean, again, it's one that's been around for a very long time. But Brock does have the ability to track all D&D that comes through. It's just in a different format than this report.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question here, Ian. Do the numbers for Marion County for municipal solid waste, do those include tonnage for alternative daily cover for the Covanta ash that's used for ACD or ADC?
I am not sure which category that would be tracked in.
Okay.
I believe it is tracked in that one. I believe it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but
I wasn't sure if it was tracked in the private vehicles, including special waste category. That
I'd have to look into that, Joel.
I don't know for sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, thanks, Brock. That'd be interesting.
Okay.
Next one is just a summary of the balance in the Environmental Trust Fund. It's continued to go up over time, and a list of all permits the site has currently.
So this is Mark. I have a couple questions here. The first question is, the environmental trust has been going up consistently, but I'm wondering how that environmental trust dollar amount has been impacted by the stock market dropping.
It's likely to have gone down a little, although I believe the required balance is 5 million. So I'm sure it's substantially above that by quite a margin.
Okay, and then the second question is, the Title V permit looks like it expired in 2014. I know it's been administratively extended. Do you have some sense of when DEQ is going to begin the process for renewal of that Title V permit?
They began that process in 2018, and I believe they will have a permit out next year, but that's beyond our control.
And have you received an applicant draft of the new Title V permit?
We have not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Ian, I'm wondering about the environmental trust fund. I mean, I can see the progression here. So what's kind of the end game for that? So
well, initially it was in the franchise agreement as kind of a safeguard for any kind of issues at the landfill, I believe.
Right, but how does that play out when we look forward into the future? Does it just increment? I guess I'm asking, does it just increment based on how long the landfill is operating, or is there a target figure that it's, that it's supposed to attain when the landfill is full and closes?
Well, the target figure was $5 million, and I don't recall when that was achieved, but it was many, many years ago.
Okay.
So at this point, it just continues to grow because it is, and I'm not the one that manages it, but it's some kind of investment of some sort, obviously, that is continuing to grow in value.
I see. So it's growing on its own. It's not receiving any further.
No, it's not receiving any contributions. It's just natural growth.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
I'm just curious about that. It seems like the more waste that goes into the landfill, the higher the environmental trust fund should become. But it doesn't seem like there's any provision for that.
Yeah, this was all settled as part of the franchise agreement. The site also maintains bonds for both closure and post-closure care that are updated on an annual basis to reflect both the increase in acreage that may have been built or the increase in tonnage over the past year. So that's something that's updated on an annual basis.
Yeah. To me, that seems more pertinent information than this environmental trust information. I'm just kind of wondering why that's not in this report, but this environmental trust information is in the report.
I believe that's because the trust fund is a Benton County requirement, and this is a Benton County report. The other is a DEQ requirement, and we report that to DEQ.
I see.
So I think it's just different people, different parties.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we move on?
Next table is verbal complaints that our scale house has received at both landfill and PRC. And there's very few. Next one is the summary of activity at PRC. And we provided a 2-year snapshot to make it easier to look at.
Yeah, thanks for this. I was just wondering if you could explain what was the numbers for green waste and food waste, comparison between 20 and 21.
I believe that's just the way they were coding it in their reporting. The overall volume really hasn't changed significantly.
Well, the overall volume has gone down from 20 to 21, even if you add them up, right? Because food waste.
2020 was a bit of an odd year with COVID. Everyone stayed home and did yard work. And it was the busiest year PRC's ever had. 2021 was also a bit abnormal with the ice storm last February. And we received a pretty significant volume of wood and other debris in February and March, which would have normally been very quiet months.
So is it safe to say that going forward, there will be no more information about urban wood waste or food waste? It'll all just be called green waste?
I believe so.
Except for the commercial food waste. Looks like there's a little number there for commercial food waste.
Yeah, it's a fairly low volume.
Okay, thank you.
This one's the odor notices at PRC. Again, on the lower side last year.
So Ian, how do you differentiate the compost? How do you know what is emitting the odor? I mean, I see this is listed as being a PRC odor. How do people know whether it's PRC or the landfill that they're smelling?
So the PRC notices, Mainly come from a couple people that have been to both sites many times and they've kind of trained their noses, I guess you would say. And they're very definitive about PRC. Some of the other ones we receive from like DEQ for Coffin Butte, where there's less confidence about which site it might be. But it was actually a former SWAC member and his wife, probably or 80% of the ones at PRC.
Okay.
I don't see in this report anything about monitoring of surface water runoff from the PRC. Is that, maybe I missed it?
That's not something that's been historically included. This was, like I said, I believe this was set up originally specifically to meet what was requested in the franchise agreement. So the overall format of the report hasn't been amended in many, many, many years.
Does that get reported to DEQ then?
It does.
Okay. Are those DEQ reports, are they available on a website anywhere, or maybe Daniel knows? I guess he's busy taking notes.
Chair, would you like me to respond to you?
Yes, please, Daniel.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to go the wrong path here. So for the PRC specific reports, we're not included on that documentation specifically, as far as I know. We receive copies of regulatory submittals for the landfill more specifically, and I think Ian could probably speak to that a little bit better, but
Yeah,
most of those are...
That's how it's been done. That was the language in the agreement.
So for any PRC specific reporting, I suggest reaching out to Oregon DEQ for any sort of records requests or anything. They might do it a little bit differently than we do, but we've been trying to publish the landfill related documents that we have been receiving.
What would be the title of that report, or sort of the general title? Because usually...
So it's the DEQ 1200Z permit.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, next.
And then it just breaks down into the appendix, which is some of the stuff Eric talked about. It's just a high level summary of some of the data from the environmental monitoring report. But the full, everything is in the version that Daniel has if you're interested. So I don't know that we need to look at that, but we also include just, again, it's in the other report, but a location of monitoring wells. One of the franchise requirements is a insurance for the county. So we provide a copy of the certificate.
Yeah, let me just interrupt you there, Ian. Are there any more questions about the material that's in the appendix? And Marge, I particularly wanted to make sure, I just saw the sort of contour map of the landfill go by. I just wanted to make sure that you are happy with, that you got your questions answered. I can't hear you, Marge.
Yes, Ian answered my questions earlier, and I appreciate it.
Okay, great. So are there any more questions?
Just a summary question, if I may.
Yeah.
This one shows the cells a lot better, Ian. Thank you. Talked about service life on closure of dry cells. I'm assuming these are all dry cells, and there's how long, I understand it takes decades for everything to decompose where there's zero leachate to have DEQ close it out. Is that assumption correct?
DEQ and EPA guidance is 30 years.
30 years. I see that some EPA is putting out standards now to add oxygen and other items to accelerate the decomposition there. I don't know if you can retrofit those, but have you looked into that at all?
Because of our relatively wet climate, waste decomposes relatively rapidly. The challenge with adding oxygen to waste is there's the potential for starting a fire below the surface. So it's fairly experimental in places that do that.
Yeah, I know they're doing it at Arlington, but they're in more of an arid area up there, and there was none at Roosevelt that I
I
seen.
would guess they're not adding oxygen. They're reintroducing their leachate that they collect. So rather than shipping it offsite for treatment, they put it back into the landfill to increase the moisture content, and that's something that's much more common.
Okay, and that's not common here though, because you're
We
not.
We have a wet enough climate that we don't need to accelerate.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So I know we've taken way too much time on this. I do have one final question, but maybe I can talk with Eric offline about this. I'm curious about table 4.2, the difference in monitoring well 27 and 26 regarding the total dissolved solids. And also, I don't quite understand the whole derivation of the site-specific limits. It's not critical. I could potentially talk with Eric offline about this. There is quite a difference between monitoring well 26 and monitoring well 27, and relatively high total dissolved solids for monitoring well 27. So just an observation. Thanks for allowing me to make a comment.
Yeah. Anything offline, feel free.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Ian, for taking the time to walk us through this and answer our questions. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to not sharing the screen so I can see people again. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Okay. So the next item on the agenda, we have the landfill issues, the annual report to DEQ that our mission as DSAC is to prepare such a thing and deliver it. So I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this because I know we've gone way over our time allotments. But I'm just wondering if people have ideas about how we should handle this. This is the reports for last year. And as Daniel kind of notes in his comments, we have quite a few reports from last year because of all the reports that came in having to do with the conditional use permit. So I would just volunteer myself to essentially put this report together. Daniel provided a bunch of information about the reports that have come in through the complaints that have come in through the usual channels. And I have all the stuff having to do with the conditional use permit. And so I could develop a list of those a summary of what those reports are. I'm just anxious for us to get this underway. So I'm wondering if there's any discussion about how you would like to see this report be done. Yeah, Daniel.
Not so much how I'd like to see the report done, more just for context. I know some folks have asked about this report in the past, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of kind of clarification. Essentially, this report, for the most part, we've had before my time again, but we've had the Coffin Butte annual report and then minutes from SWAC and DSAC meetings kind of fill the need for this. And the issue that we've run into is when submitting this report, DEQ hasn't really indicated that they would be making use of it, or that they were asking for it or needing it. So we submitted a report in the style draft that you see in your packet today. Last year, we essentially brought it to DSAC. The group voted to include it as kind of part of that formal submission. I just wanted you all to know sort of the history that the report hasn't really been actively asked for, and possibly not kind of used to the extent that maybe the DSAC bylaws led on. So just some clarification, sort of guidance on that. But the bylaws do say that it's intended to be used as part of the permitting process for the disposal site and for review by DSAC. So a little bit of context, and that's all I have.
Are we all getting tired? Yes. So I'm just going to say the chair will take it under advisement. You know, being a writer myself, how reports have been done in the past has never been any sort of a barrier to me to how I think that they should be done. So I'm just really, I'm interested in bumping this up to another level. You know, I think that it's really just kind of languished in the past, and people maybe let it languish, but that doesn't mean last year was an extraordinary year. And I think that the document really should reflect that, you know. And in particular, I'm concerned that essentially the reporting mechanisms for the sorts of complaints or issues that the report is designed for, those in themselves are not really working. And so we got kind of more of a glance last year at what is actually going on with the landfill. And so I just want to respond to that. So are there any objections to me just going ahead and producing a report, which we can look at our next meeting? Okay, cool. Good, I gave myself some more work. That's always fun. Okay, the next item on the agenda is talking about accelerating information flows to DSAC and SWAC. And we had talked about this before. I'm going to go ahead and just take this off the table so we can move on. This is something that I'll take up with Daniel to see if we can't get some of these reports in a more timely fashion. So wrapping up the DSAC portion then, do we have any member requests? Anybody? I'm not seeing any. Agenda items for the next DSAC meeting.
So this is Mark. I'd just like to reiterate my concern about the independent audit being stuck here under DSAC, and not you know, now it's not going to be discussed yet for another 3 months, and we haven't talked about it yet. And I think I asked about it back in the very first quarter of the year. So a little frustration there that's still on the DSAC agenda.
Yes, so big frustration there, and you're not the only one. I mean, looking back over things today, or just noticed there are a number kind of questions of issues like that, which have come up before DSAC, because we meet only every 3 months. You know, they get forgotten, they get overlooked by me, whatever the deal is. So we kind of have a charter here, or an opportunity, I guess I would say, that now there is the work group, and the work group has a specific function of they're supposed to be deriving a list of common understandings by the end of August. And so I'm wondering if we want to have a special DSAC meeting next month, a dedicated meeting essentially to pursue these items that we've just kind of kicked down the road, so that when our representatives go into their meetings in September, we will have actually pursued these farther and we'll have better information for them as they begin the meetings with the work group. Joel, I'm sorry, I'm just blanking there.
I would support having that type of meeting. I think we've got quite a backlog of DSAC issues to get through, and
anyone else?
Is this a work session or is it a regular meeting like this?
I would think that this would be a regular meeting, because I think there'll be public comment for people who have brought up these matters, would like to reiterate them. So we would have a 5th meeting as DSAC.
Would it be like scheduled concurrently with the SWAC meeting like this one was?
Yes, although I hate it when we have dual meetings. So I'm kind of open to either. I'm kind of open to any suggestion about how to do it. We could indeed supplant the SWAC meeting with a DSAC meeting because our backlog is so high. Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, I'm just noticing, I just looked at the SWAC agenda for next, or our future things, and we actually have this listed under SWAC for the next regular meeting on August 24th, the topic that Mark was bringing up. So if we make that a priority and just treat it in SWAC, I guess it could work.
So Joel, I think they're two different things, just to say, because one is an independent audit of the waste that's being brought into the landfill. This independent and third-party landfill data, I think this is a different item. That's how I looked at this closely before, and I think they're two different things, but I'm not sure. I know that what I'm talking about is an independent audit of what's actually going into the landfill. There are several things that are prohibited by their solid waste permit, and I think that there are probably things like that that are going into the landfill. We don't know how much, how often, or how to stop it and control it. So I think this item on the SWAC agenda is has to do with other things in terms of like the stuff we were talking about earlier. How much volume is there in the landfill? All those sorts of data things. But maybe Daniel or Ken could explain if they're the same or different.
Yeah, well, they're the same in as far as we are talking about basic information about the landfill that we just don't have. And so a number of people in the public have brought up kind of issues that we could look into, essentially where we would say we recommend that we do this sort of a study. We recommend that, the sort of audit that Mark is talking about, about what is going into the landfill would fall into that sort of category. And I'm sorry, I had exactly what I was referring to in my mind when I began this meeting, but it's since dropped out. But it's easy to kind of put together that list. So yeah, Chuck.
Once we establish the list, and that's in each category, whether it's SWAC or DSAC, it's a recommendation to the commission to fund that. Is that the processes of that? Because since we have neither SWAC or DSAC has a budget, correct? So we would have to
Right.
look for that with the county. I'm
So
making that
we would,
assumption.
yes, we essentially would be saying these are important things for us to establish and to establish independently. So I think that's another issue that's come forward is just, you know, how much of the information about the landfill and more generally about, you know, solid waste, you know, for Benton County, you know, are we, you know, it would be nice to independently verify some of this data. Yeah, Chuck. You're muted, Chuck.
I'm assuming
You muted yourself again.
there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, I'm assuming a truck comes in and makes a dump. At that time it dumps, then all materials could be categorized at that time, whether it's hazmat, whether it's tires, whether it's construction. So it would meet multiple criterias like Mark was talking about and some of the other criteria, just to say, all right, here's a sample tons and it is categorized like in X amount of plastic, X amount of this. So then you have a good baseline. And then once that ton is established, that's can be extrapolated out for everything else. I'm assuming we would try to get it in one fell swoop.
Yeah, well, I believe, Mark, that's what you're talking about, right? Is having that sort of an examination of what's going in.
I am talking about having an examination, but certainly it wouldn't be with just one truck, and I wouldn't necessarily need it to go to the level of detail that Chuck was just talking about. I am mostly focused on things like hazardous materials, electronics, and some of the things that are explicitly and specifically prohibited from being dumped into the landfill.
Yeah. Chuck, you're muted.
It's a matter of just timing out there. And would it not best if you're going to look at one truck or 10 trucks to be a good sampling to categorize everything into it? It doesn't seem like it'd be that much more effort than just singly go out and look for hazmat material.
I think we're down into the weeds about this inventory. You know, the question is, do we want to actually have one of some kind? And so someone, you know, someone who knows what they can do, what they're doing to put that together. And so exactly what they can be looking for is something we can advise on down the road. But really, we just want to have a session. So getting back to the original point, you know, do we want to have a session about this? We're at the agenda portion, essentially, of the DSAC meeting. So do we want to have DSAC at our next meeting take up some of these issues?
I would rather do that than have it at a separate time.
Okay. Are we in agreement about that?
Yeah.
Okay. I will try to configure the agenda accordingly for our next meeting. So thank you all on that. Okay. So time, I think, to adjourn the DSAC portion. I think we're all ready, right? Do we entertain a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mark. And Debbie, was that you also? Are you seconding?
Okay, I'm voting yes. Debbie can second and
Sure. I think we're all quite done. So now, folks, before we undertake the moving into the SWAC portion, I'm just looking at the time and how tired we all are. Do we want to call it a night, is my question.
I'm guessing that we can't do that. I think we've got to convene the SWAC meeting. We've got an opportunity for community comments. I don't know if there are any. And it seems like we've already dealt with the Oregon consensus thing.
We
But
can approve the agenda. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
the
sorry.
previous meeting.
Okay. So
Kind of.
yes, what? I'm sorry, Debbie, I keep interrupting you.
No, I'm sorry. I think I keep interrupting you. It seems like we should try to have a brief meeting and take care of the previous meetings minutes and just what Mark said.
Okay. Thank you very much for keeping me on the, keeping my nose to the grindstone, or whatever the appropriate expression is. So I'm calling this SWAC meeting to order, everyone. Thank you all for hanging in here. So first of all, we have the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Oh, and by the way, Linda, all of the SWAC members are hanging in there. Raise your hand if you have any changes or suggestions about the minutes. Mark, have you got something?
Nope, I was just going to make a motion to approve it as presented.
All right. Mark has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joel. All in favor? Raise your hands.
Sorry. Sorry, I have to say something because I think there is an error in the minutes. I was going a little too quickly. My apologies.
You're torpedoing your own motion, Mark? You withdrew it just in time.
Yeah, well, but had you said any discussion, I might have then been able to catch it. But I was confused under the approval of minutes for May 26th, where it talks about a second edit is to change Ken Eklund's title from chair of SWAC to vice chair. I didn't understand what that was.
So that's a very good catch, because of course it was to change my title from vice chair
to chair.
To chair, since I had been elected. Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. Is there a second? Yes. So Joel has seconded. All in favor? Please raise your hand.
Yeah.
Aye.
Great. So unanimously amended with the correction as noted. Okay, and so we do come to the community member comments. Are there any comments from the community? Our loyal listeners still hanging in there here at the 2 hours and 45-minute mark. My heavens. I'm not seeing anyone unmuting, so no community member comments. Okay, priorities and intentions, we'll do the same as, you can skip over that because we were handling that offline. And so now we're to the bylaws. So this again are the changes that we worked during our work session. Does anyone have any last minute discussion about those? I think we have to approve them either as written or not. Yeah, Joel.
I just wanted to hear, just since Chuck seemed to be unhappy with the previous batch, what the issues might be. I'm curious.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing, Chuck. You're muted.
My concern was, I'm somewhat of an institutionalist in the sense that the legislature passes a ORS and the county seat being part of government. And then the subtleties of the language sometimes are significant. And I just didn't know what the process was, but I think you guys clarified that. That would go to counsel, to legal, and they would advise that would be a drastic change of the ORS through what Benton County originally engaged the DSAC and SWAC. So I'm trying to look at their philosophy, why they did that, and keep it within those parameters, or if we can bring them together. And I think you clarified that. It's just not, we're making recommendations, but they have the due diligence to look at them specifically to make sure they're not changed inherently. That's what my concern was.
Okay. Mark. Or are
So
you
I
just
just
getting
had,
ready to go? Go
well,
ahead.
no,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask for clarification, and I think you did this in your notes in the annotated changes. But the new bullets that are being added under the purpose, you've extracted those word for word, except for, I think it's the 11th bullet, where you've added some language to provide for public input in solid waste management by providing a form, blah, blah, blah. That's new language that you're proposing to be added here. Is that correct?
Yes, it's not exactly new language. It's just the language for DSAC.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Okay.
So it's the attempt to kind of bring those things so they're not, yeah, they're you know, to try to reconcile, these points of contention that we sometimes have between which hat we're wearing when and that sort of thing.
All right. Great. Thank you. And then just one minor editorial change under membership. The first line talks about membership shall consist of 10 voting members, 3 ex officio not voting members. That technically should be non-voting members, not. But I don't think we need a motion to change that. That's the language that exists and something we didn't catch previously. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you. I'll be quiet.
It's quite all right. We appreciate your diligence, Mark. So are we ready to vote on whether or not we send these along to the commissioners or charge Daniel to do so? Okay. So all in favor of proposing these? I should make these. I'm terrible at motions, right? So actually, I can't make motions. Somebody else needs to do this.
Yeah, I don't think we have a motion on the floor at the moment.
I'm asking for a motion. Joel.
I'll move that we recommend to the commissioners that they consider these changes.
All right. Second. Is that you, Debbie?
Oh, I thought it was you. I thought you could second a motion.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I'll second that motion. Ooh, the feeling of power that gives me, just amazing. Thank you, Debbie. So let's vote. All in favor? Please raise your hands. I am seeing everyone. It's unanimous. Thank you all for all the work that we've done, essentially looking at those bylaws. It's kind of, I don't know, legalistic, way legalistic for me, but necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we've dealt with what we needed to deal with regarding the Oregon Consensus Assessment. We have our representatives, and I think we're all agreed that we really want to give them what they need to represent us well and these issues well. And so that's going to be a part of SWAC action essentially over the coming months is finding out what you guys know and then what you need to know. Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, there was just one thing in here. I wondered if Daniel's able to comment on the possibility of going ahead with the subcommittee for the regional SWAC.
Very good. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so now that the assessment is complete, there's no issues with having a subcommittee and doing business as usual. We haven't received any specific guidance from the Board of Commissioners advising against that. So feel free to move forward with the work that you'd like to do. It wouldn't be interfering now that the assessment is complete. You have staff agreement to move forward on that.
Okay, excellent. Subcommittee, you are so charged. So are there, Daniel.
I'm sorry, Chair. So there's a couple specifics. We didn't really have a chance to dive into it too much when this subcommittee was first brought up, but there's a couple specifics for you to kind of formally do during a meeting. And I'm not sure if it's specific to the chair role, but the group has to decide on a name of the committee to move forward with, which I don't think had been done. These are a couple bylaw things. I just wanted to make sure that we had those in order before moving forward. So it's the formal membership and the formal name, I think, is the two things in the bylaws.
Okay. Joel?
I'm going to suggest we table that for the next meeting. If
Is
Chuck
that
and John
something
were
that
the ones that were volunteering.
Yeah. Chuck, did you have something? You're muted.
I think as long as it's preceded by regional, it pretty well fits regional SWAC. So just, it's getting late.
Yeah, it is. It's so Chuck, you're muted.
Oh. Are we in order to postpone it till another meeting, or I wasn't sure if there was a motion made by Joel there.
Well, I wanted to ask Daniel. I wanted to ask Daniel if this is something that could be done offline.
I can scroll through the bylaws really quick. I think if you want the committee to be formed, I think it's pretty vague. I think it's basically a chair decision, as if I can remember correctly. I don't want to take too much time with the research here, but I'm pretty sure it's a chair decision. So I can imagine you could form it offline. But yeah, it's the meeting times, the membership, and the name that sort of has to be formalized by the chair role. So I think you can do it offline, but I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. If it's up to the chair is going to say that, yes, we can do that online. I mean, I saw you nodding there, Debbie, and you're kind of the voice of wisdom on these affairs for me. So we will look into it, and if we cannot do it offline, then it's going to come up at our next meeting. So there we go. Any other member requests? Any other agenda items?
Oh, here, Ken.
Yes. Hi, Mark.
I just wanted to make sure that we got Nancy Whitcomb on the agenda for next month.
Thank you very much. Yes. So we will indeed. Nancy had a request to be on our agenda, and that will happen. Well, let's see. Well, I think in her request, she wanted us to actually make that a motion. So,
So well, I move that we do that we add Nancy Whitcomb for a presentation next meeting.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second for Joel. So Marge making that motion, Joel seconding, all in favor? Indicate. So it looks unanimous. So thank you all. Look forward to talking with Nancy next meeting. And it looks like we're going to actually come in under the 3-hour mark. So
Really?
Daniel, thank you for sticking with us for this amount of time. Cutting into your evening a little bit, I imagine. So
I'm happy to.
before I entertain a motion for adjournment, is there any other discussion items or things that people want to bring up? I think not. I think we're all a little bit fried. Thank you all so much for hanging in there. And as always, for the contributions that you make as volunteers. We're trying to make our county a little bit of a better place to live in, or maybe even much better place to live in. So do I hear a motion for adjournment from someone?
So moved.
So moved by Mark Yeager.
Second.
And Debbie seconds.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Ken and Daniel and Ian and Brock and everybody.
Yes, indeed. So seconded by John, with thirding by Debbie, and all in favor? It's unanimous.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all.
Yes, indeed. Good to see you.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone. Here's to cooler weather next time.
Yeah. Good night, everybody. Hey, Ken, thank you so much for shouting people's names. I think it'll make Linda's life way easier. I really appreciate it. I thought you did a great job with that. It's not an easy task to remember. Thank you, Joel. It was good to see you.
Yeah, I think other people actually did a better job with that.
Thanks, Daniel.
They kept reminding me that we needed to do that. So,
Well, chairing is no easy role, and you really did a good job. So we appreciate
all right.
it. All right. Take care.
Good night. Thank you, Daniel.